Like somehow I got a backwards image, so it says Grammy Awards backwards on mine, but oh well.
Should I bring it in then just as usual and then short introduction and you go straight in? Is that what we're going to do? Or
Sure.
did you just,
Sounds good.
did you have something else planned?
No, if you want to, like, you can just reference the past successes and I'll
Okay.
discuss them.
Yeah, because I'll do a little bit of it'll seem like a lengthy intro to you because you're sitting there just waiting to go. But keep in mind that after the intro, I don't do much. It's pretty much all you with me occasionally asking the questions. So, and plus I want people to log on, and not miss, of course, the first, you kind of want people to get settled. But anyway, so here we go.
That's all good.
Good.
All right.
I got to put the title in, excuse me.
Yeah, go ahead.
Angel, I'm going to go on the air now, okay? Let me put this in the entertainment division of, there we go, okay.
All right.
All right, looks like we're live. All right, and 3,
yes,
and 2, and 1. Welcome, I'm Nolan Dalla. Welcome to an intelligent conversation, but this is really going to be an intelligent conversation starring the one and only Matt Lessinger. Matt Lessinger is, I'm not hyperbolic here by calling him the world's foremost authority on the topic of betting on the Grammys. And for those of you who have followed Matt and myself, my own writings, promoting Matt's stuff and betting on Matt's stuff and cashing on Matt's stuff, over the last 10 years, he has made his predictions online, on Facebook, on my page, also on National Public Radio. He was a guest about 10 years ago, and he just has nailed it a lot more often than he's had misses. He's had a lot more homers than strikeouts, and that's remarkable, a testament to his staying power, and maybe more of a testament just to his great research capabilities. For those of you who are thinking this show is not for me, I'm not into music, I don't know of any of the Grammy people, I don't know anything about the Grammys. Well, this is going to be an interesting exercise in how a handicapper, how somebody analyzes something and comes up to a decision on making a wager. This is, I think, one of the subjects that I've most been looking forward to time of year. So without further ado, welcome Matt Lessinger.
Thank you for the introduction. Wow, we should just quit right now. That was great. Thank you.
Well, everybody's hanging on, getting ready to bet. So Matt, let me ask you a question before you launch into a lot of stuff. This is our pregame show up the first 25, 30 minutes. We're going to talk about what you've done the last 10 years, and then we're going to give your picks the last 30 minutes of the show. But you told me something before we went on the air that you have listened to all 8 of the album of the years. what do you listen to when when you listen to an album? What are you listening for?
Well, over the years, you start to get a sense of what the Grammy voters are listening for or what they favor. And I'll sort of discuss that as I go over some of the previous winners. And that's really what I'm listening for, is like sort of a process of elimination. Like, you know, will Grammy voters gravitate to this? Is it too polarizing? Is it, am I listening to the album sort of just like waiting for it to end? That's a bad sign right there. If you're just like, okay, they're all starting to sound the same. Um, but yeah, I listened to all 8 albums, and that's, I enjoy it. Like I said in the in the promo for this show, I mean, part of the reason I love doing this is just because I love music and I love listening to new music, and getting an album or two nominated that I never would have listened to, under any other circumstances. And now it's like, okay, well, let me hear what the Grammy voters heard in this in order to nominate it for Album of the Year. And, just try to get into their head and think, what are they listening for? Even though I don't know any of the Grammy voters personally, I have to imagine they're an older crowd. I think me being 46, I'm probably, at the younger end of the spectrum for who the Grammy voters are. So I know they're sort of old-fashioned in their thinking. That's something else we're going to talk about. And yeah, like I said, just looking for something they would gravitate to. So I mean, just if I could just launch into it. I mean, going back to last year, for example, really the two front runners in every major category were Billie Eilish and Lizzo. And Lizzo, this is not to, put down her music or anything like that. I like rap. I like hip hop. I really do. I listen to a ton of it. But if we're talking about historically how Grammy voters vote, you'd go broke betting them in the open categories. So, they'll win for best rap album, best R&B album, whatever. But once you start getting into album of the year and song of the year and record of the year, very often they go off at low odds because they're songs that are popular, that a lot of people have heard of. And then if they're just putting a bet down on the Grammys just for a rooting interest, it's like, oh yeah, I know that song. I hear it on the radio all the time. But that doesn't mean the Grammy voters are going to vote for it. So lots of times they'll get overbet. And I think that was the case with Lizzo last year, where it's like, it's just not a sound that Grammy voters are going to go for. And Billie Eilish, is not necessarily the stereotypical Grammy darling. I think she was only 17, 18 years old. But one of the angles that works in her favor is that she absolutely pays tribute to artists that have come before her. I mean, her style is very deferential to past artists and trying to, not copy them, but like emulate them, and it's listenable across all ages, all genres. I mean, if you're, too young, or if you're a uptight white male, I'll just put it that way, Lizzo's not going to appeal to you, but Billie Eilish, there's really no genre that she couldn't appeal to, right? And we got lucky last year. I'm going to be honest with that. We got lucky because Billie Eilish was the favorite in a couple of the categories, and a prohibitive favorite to the point where I wouldn't have said there was any value in betting her. But Bovada put up a wager that if she swept all 4 major categories, they would pay 6-1. And I think it was like you had to lay 12-1 that she wouldn't. And as a parlay, if it was like you were parlaying each individual category, 6-1 wouldn't be enough value. But it doesn't really work that way. It's like, you know what? If she wins record of the year, she's more likely to win song of the year. And if she wins both of those, then she's more likely to win album of the year. Suddenly go ahead.
Yeah, excuse me, Matt. Let me interrupt with something that I think I've heard this phrase used on Academy Awards balloting, and also, that goes for wagering too, that those who vote on these awards will sometimes split their ballots, meaning they want to give this song or this album kudos for this, but they don't want, another like Michael Jackson, going up on stage 9 times, or Prince. And, there's this, I don't want to say fatigue factor with certain artists, but so is there, I guess the question is there a split your ballot factor? I guess there's not in the Grammys, huh?
Not that I've seen. There have been enough times that artists have swept. I mean, not necessarily all 4. This is one of those rare times where the artist that is the favorite for album of the year, record of the year, song of the year was also qualified as a best new artist. So she just happened to, be eligible in all 4 categories. Best new artist, she was like minus 400 favorite. And it's like, if I had to bet it individually, I would have said, yeah, she's probably going to win, but we can't bet it at that price. Like, it's just, minus 400, forget about it. Album of the year, she was the favorite. And I say, yeah, she's probably the deserving favorite for album of the year, but I think she was like minus 160 in an 8 nominee field. It's like, you can't lay 160 when there's 8 nominees, and like, she wasn't a slam dunk. But when it comes to this, what I would call a correlated parlay, where it's like, absolutely, if you win record of the year and you're also eligible for song of the year, your odds just got way better. Like, that is a given as a trend in Grammys. Like, it's over 50% of the time that the same song wins both. So, once a particular artist wins record of the year, you like your bet that much more for song of the year. And then if she wins both, now it almost seems, it seems like, of course, she's probably going to win album of the year. But I was lucky, or we were lucky, anybody that followed my picks, that Bovada offered that wager at 6-1. And, I even joked, I was like, Bovada didn't put up their odds until 4 days ago. I was worried that too many people made that bet on Billie Eilish at 6-1. And the sportsbook manager was like, screw this, we're not going to offer it anymore. No more betting on the Grammys. But thankfully, they put up odds again. There's been some interesting stuff going on with the odds, and I'll get into that as well. We were just talking about, like, does the same artist win for all categories? 2018, Bruno Mars, record of the year, song of the year, album of the year, and he was over 3-1 in each of those categories. And Bruno Mars is the stereotypical artist that Grammy voters look for, because he's popular across all, for men and women, for old people and young people. And he has a throwback style, and he absolutely pays tribute to the artists that went before him. Like, if you could be in your 60s and 70s, as my father is, and loves doo-wop, and you listen to Bruno Mars and you hear the influence of doo-wop in his music. And if you're an older Grammy voter, absolutely you're going to vote for him. I mean, you want the artist that makes you think, oh man, this reminds me of my childhood. This reminds me of songs I heard 40, 50 years ago. I mean, tribute doesn't even have to go back that far. Like, nowadays, if you're paying tribute to artists from the 80s and 90s, like, that's paying tribute. And the one that I think is the favorite for album of the year absolutely pays tribute this year. So, 2018 was a very successful year for betting on the Grammys, because I also had Alicia Cara for best new artist. So we swept the major categories that year. Like I said, got at least 3-1 on record of the year, song of the year, album of the year. Just going back to 2017, I'll give you a quick story about that. The 2 almost co-favorites for album of the year were Beyonce and Adele. I'll give you a little Grammy trivia. Beyonce is the most nominated female artist in Grammy history. Counting this year, she has 79 nominations,
Wow.
which is phenomenal. She's won 24 times, which is also, it's above average if you're nominated 79 times. And, most categories up until recently, most categories have 5 nominees. So if you won 24 out of 79 times, you're definitely ahead of the curve. How many times do you think she's won in the major categories? 1 time, ever, for the song Single Ladies. She won,
Lemonade didn't win anything?
Lemonade didn't win anything. Well, that's what we're talking about in 2017. Adele and Beyonce were the co-favorites, and Beyonce always gets tons of action because she's Beyonce, and people have heard her music and they like it, and I don't blame them. And Beyonce's probably, gotten shafted. If you ask Beyonce's fans, she's absolutely gotten shafted in the Grammys. But from a betting perspective, you pretty much have to fade her anytime, and that's going to come into play this year as well. So, just from the angle of fading Beyonce, I think I got plus 160 on Adele that year for album of the year, and it came in. I'm just going to go back to 2015 real quick. I just trying to get some good stories out there before 4:00. Beyonce was the favorite again in 2015 for her self-titled album, and you had to fade her. And then it's like, okay, you look at the different nominees, and Sam Smith and Ed Sheeran were too new. Pharrell Williams was, more hip hop artists, which you got to fade that in the album of the year category as well. And one of the angles that's really worked for album of the year is what I call the Lifetime Achievement Award angle, where it's like an artist really isn't getting nominated for the work he did on his most recent album. It's more like paying tribute for a lifetime of work.
Like Bob Dylan winning in 2007?
Exactly. And so if you go back, was it 2007?
I could have the year wrong.
Yeah, I think it's even older.
It was the album where he recorded the whole thing in a New York City hotel room, basically.
Yes. So just to give you an idea, that was 1998.
Oh, was that long ago? Okay.
Yes. So to give you an idea, I'll go back even a little further than that. Tony Bennett won in 1995, right, for his MTV Unplugged album. That was absolutely a Lifetime Achievement Award angle. I'm not saying I wasn't betting it in 1995, but just to give you an idea. Bob Dylan in 1998. Steely Dan won in 2001 with an album nobody had ever heard of. Like, nobody had heard that. They didn't even know Steely Dan put out an album in 2001. But he won. And then going more recently than that, 2005, Ray Charles. I'm hesitant to call that a Lifetime Achievement Award winner because that was a good album. That was Ray Charles with a lot of guest appearances.
That was his final album, wasn't it?
It was the year he died. So it's like another angle was just that he passed away. It's like, yeah, you figure they're going to give it to him. 2008, Herbie Hancock. So that, from an odds perspective, that is the longest shot I've ever seen to win Album of the Year. He was 22-1 that year. And that was the year that I went on National Public Radio. You were referencing that. I went on in 2008 to give my picks, and Kanye West was the heavy, heavy favorite that year. And I mean, I would love Kanye West now, but back in the day, I thought his music was phenomenal. But he was like a minus 400 favorite as a rap artist. I was like, that's insane. Like, you have to fade him. And Amy Winehouse, even though, in retrospect, we can appreciate her music, she was a bit of a wreck, in terms of alcoholism or whatever. And you sense they weren't going to reward that. And so I landed on Vince Gill, the country artist, at 18-1. And that was my tout. I was like, just like process of elimination, I'm like, maybe this is the year they give it to a country artist. As it turns out, I didn't go with enough of a long shot. It was like Herbie Hancock at 22-1. But that's actually, believe it or not, going to have some influence in one of our picks this year. Herbie Hancock's win in 2008. And then, 2015, Beck winning for Morning Phase at odds. He opened up 7-1. I bet him at 7-1. He went up as high as 10-1. Shout out to my friend Ryan Myers for helping me get more action on him at 10-1. And that came in, and that was just a solid hit. That was pleasing. And I mean, there's a couple other stories, but that's the those are the big ones. Oh, 2011, I guess I'll mention that one. Arcade Fire, winning for album of the year, had that at 8-1 as well, and that was because Eminem was the favorite. And again, I love me some Eminem, but if you're gonna make a rap artist the favorite, you got to go against it. This is something I'm gonna harp on forever. The only two rap/hip hop artists that have ever won album of the year: Lauryn Hill in 1999, Outkast in 2004. As Tony Kornheiser says, that's it. That's the list. That's it. Just the two of them. And it's been now 17 years since a hip hop artist has won album of the year. And until they show a willingness to give it to another one, you just have to keep fading them. I mean, there's been so much money burned on hip hop artists to win in the open categories that if God forbid, not God forbid, but I mean, if it ever happens, you take it. It's like, okay, this is the year they finally decided to act right and give it to a hip hop artist. But, when that happens, I'm going to get burned. But until then, you just got to keep fading them. Let's see. One more funny story I'll give from 2014, right? Even though Herbie Hancock was, from an odds perspective, the longest shot ever to win at 22-1, in my mind, the most, the biggest upset was Daft Punk winning in 2014. Like, if you had given me 40-1 odds on them, I probably would not have taken it. I probably would have said they had a 1% chance of winning. I think that's the only year I did not place a bet on album of the year, because Taylor Swift was I want to say a -500 favorite. And the other nominees were Kendrick Lamar. He was the second choice. He's a rap artist. Macklemore and Ryan Lewis, another rap artist. Sarah Bareilles, I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing it right, and Daft Punk. And I was just like, forget it. Taylor Swift is going to win. We're wasting our money if we bet on anything else. And one of the most fun Grammy moments that I can remember is, Taylor Swift's album was named Red, and Daft Punk's album was named Random Access Memories. So they both began with an R. And when they started to read the winner, and the winner is, and they start with the R, and Taylor Swift and her entourage stand up. And then it's like Random Access Memories by Daft Punk. And they had to sit their asses down. It's like, sorry, you didn't win. And they had to act all polite and clap or whatever. And Did
Kanye West run up and grab the award away from them on the stage?
No, but Kanye West did run up the year that Beck won for Morning Phase the next year, sort of as a joke. He ran up because Beyonce was the favorite. Everybody thought she was going to win. And then he just went and sat back down again. But Daft Punk's upset win, again, is going to have some influence in our picks this year.
All right,
so,
great. All right, Matt. So
we're about reaching 4 o'clock.
Yeah, let's wrap up this pregame show with, I'm going to throw you a curveball. We didn't expect this, but I knew we'd have some questions. We got a lot of questions. Before we go to your picks, which again, if you're just tuning in, I'm with Matt Lessinger, the world's foremost authority on Grammy Awards betting. Has been doing this well over 10 years, has appeared on national media, and he has really whipped it the last several years. Occasionally a bad year, but he's had a lot more winners than losers. Here, let me get to a few questions. And out of time, again, just out of time, I have to ask, if you do have questions, go ahead and type them in as we go. I'm going to try to get to all of them. Matt, that's going to require you to answer these in 20 to 30 seconds tops. Sure. I know you want to give them a lot more depth, but let's just go down the line. Question again, if you're typing in the questions, Matt's going to talk about this year's awards. I'm not going to read those on the air. There's no reason. Fiona Apple is a lock tomorrow night. I know. Let's just go on and start with that. We'll not go ahead. Fiona Apple a lock? Yes or no?
The only site that's showing odds on her has her as -300 for best rock song. Short answer is no. I don't think she's a lock. I think Phoebe Bridgers has a legitimate shot. I'm not going to claim that I know the other 3 artists because I haven't listened to them. I think Phoebe Bridgers is kind of the dark horse in this year's Grammys. So I'll just throw that out there.
Okay.
Mhm.
The Susan Lucci artist, who is that? That refers to basically I think that's the actress who keeps losing the Emmys every year. Every year,
Yep.
used to, that not anymore. But she went 20-something years without winning. Who is the artist that's the Susan Lucci of the music industry? Is there such a person?
I mean, it's got to be Beyonce. I mean, it's got to be what we just talked about. Beyonce winning once in the major categories out of 79 nominations. I mean, not 79 nominations in the major categories, but you figure if the Grammys are going to reward her to that degree, and just one time in almost a 20-year career, and she gets best, record of the year one time. You know what? I'll also give a shout out to, Kendrick Lamar. I mentioned him in 2014. It's really hard for a rap artist to win in the open categories. But just the fact that he got nominated for Album of the Year in 2014 and 2016 and 2018. So he put out 3 straight albums, and all 3 of them got nominated for Album of the Year, is nearly unheard of for a rap artist. So I'm not calling him the Susan Lucci or anything, but obviously he didn't win any of those times. I think history is going to look back on that and sort of have more recognition for that kind of achievement. I mean, he was really at the top of his game.
Yeah. Okay, so this is a good question. I should have addressed this probably at the very start. What is the eligibility for being nominated for a Grammy? Is it the calendar year, the previous year you had to have been released? Is that it, or I don't know?
Yeah, you know what? I don't have a full grasp on it myself. Like, there is some cutoff date, which is not the calendar year. It's like September. So it's like or at least this year it was September. I don't know if it changes, but like it had to be released before September of 2020 to be eligible for this one. But then it's not clear exactly what constitutes the release date, because, an album gets released, but not every song on that album gets eligible. So like, an album gets released in June, but then a song doesn't get released as a single until December. So the album's eligible one year and the song's eligible the other year. I don't have a complete grasp on it myself. And to be honest, that's sort of, it's made it kind of awkward sometimes, especially Best New Artist. Like, don't get me started on that. Like, there's artists that have had like a 10-year career already that suddenly show up in the Best New Artist category. It's like, how did they qualify? Like, it seems a little subjective, but that's the short answer, is that no, it's not based on the calendar year. There is a cutoff date.
Another question that somebody's typed in here. Is there a bias against country artists or country music, especially when it comes to the lap over categories?
It's hard to say. I mean, so in 2019, which was not a winning year, I did have Dua Lipa at Best New Artist that year, so I didn't strike out entirely. But Casey Musgraves was the betting favorite. She's a country artist, and she was plus 130 in an 8-nominee field, and you can't bet her. She's a country artist, and she's the favorite. She won. Okay, so she won. You move on from that. But they gave it to her, so I guess that was their shout out to country. In fairness, it was a comparatively weak field. I think like history will bear that out. Like, if you look at the 8 nominees from 2019, not too many of them are going to stand the test of time. But yeah, I'd say there's probably a bias against country, but I mean, country has its own categories. Yeah. Okay. Yes, it does. You got me. There is a bias.
A lot of certainty there in that answer.
Yeah, there's a bias against rap, and there's a bias against country. Like I said, you need songs that can appeal across all races and genders and ages. And country really doesn't. Country is pretty niche. So there's a reason why, it's sort of the same as hip hop in that regard, where it's not going to get a lot of love in the open categories.
Yeah. Maybe the most important question that I'll ask you here, someone's asking here on Facebook Live, where can I bet these?
Okay. Bovada is the one. Before Bovada put up the odds this year.
Bovada, let's get it right. Not some people are new at this.
Sorry.
Bovada. If you're in the United States, you can bet at Bovada. Is that correct?
I'm not going to speak to the legality of it because I don't know precisely, but yes, I've been on Bovada for 20 years and I endorse them. I mean, I think they're good. Um, excuse me, never had a real problem with them in 20 years. The only other site that I saw with odds is a site called MyBookie. And just being honest, they're just by eyeballing it, their house take on it is so brutal that like I would never suggest betting any of these. If Bovada hadn't put up odds, then I would have like held my nose and maybe made a couple of bets with, some really heavy juice on them. But
Doug Waz just commented. He says you can bet at Bet US. Does that?
Okay, I wasn't aware of that. Site. Oh, okay.
So let me throw that out there. I don't think that I certainly was not aware that Bet US is a big site. I was not aware that they were taking action on the Grammys. Doug, if you want to type in and confirm that you type that, but I want to make sure that that's correct. We're giving it this information. We're going to get now to in just a second to Matt's actual 2021 Grammy selections. I'm just going to turn it over to him in a second, but let's follow up to the previous question. Do you foresee the time when Americans, most people watching us are in the United States, in Nevada, in New Jersey, in places where there's legal sports wagering, that there will be, legal betting on the Grammys, the Academy Awards, things like that?
I don't think so. I think
really, why not?
Well, if it's when you have things like reality TV or Grammy Awards or something where it's like there are some people that know the outcome, like sports. Assuming that it's on the up and up, like nobody knows the outcome, right? But with things like politics and what I say, reality TV, like there's somebody out there that knows the outcome. So if you start allowing big bets on it, it really is open to corruption. I think we saw that with the first season of Survivor. Las Vegas took bets on the first season of Survivor, and then like they were getting way too many bets on the guy that turned out to be the winner. And then, of course, they realized something was up, and that was it. I think Las Vegas introduced a law that now sports books can only take action on sporting events. They can't take action on reality TV or politics or awards shows or anything like that. And as long as offshores are willing to do it, I don't think there's going to be too much clamoring for a.
I need to get me a job, Matt, at Price Waterhouse. That's all. We can make a shitload of money, man.
Don't even joke about that. By the way, with the Bet US thing, like, I feel like I checked a while ago, so it's entirely possible that they put up odds recently, just like Bovada did.
Sorry to interrupt you, but it's confirmed, by the way. Doug, thank you, by the way, for questions, Doug. You confirmed that you have made wagers there, although the wagers are small, very limited. And then Nick Christensen, thank you. Nick is obviously a great authority on this topic. He says also that Bet US also has it. So here's what I'm going to do going forward. Matt, you're looking at me live. I'm going to put you on the full screen. Whenever I have a question, I'm going to go to the screen like you see now with me. That's the only reason you're looking at me is not for my beautiful face, but because I'll have a question. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn it over to Matt now with his 2021 Grammy picks. Here we go. Here's what you've been waiting for. Pen in hand. Here we go. Or not pen in hand, but maybe finger on the button ready to fire. These odds could very well change as we're giving them out. I'm really quite serious about that. We've actually seen that happen. So whenever you see me coming back on the screen, that means I have a question or a follow-up. So with further ado, here we go to Matt Lessinger with his 2021 selections.
Right on. Thank you, Nolan. And so you're going to hear me quote prices that I saw on Bovada. And obviously, I encourage you to look at BetUS or any other site. And obviously, if you see a good price, by all means, go for it. So let's start with Best New Artist. The odds-on favorite is Megan Thee Stallion at -350. Yes, if you are not up on modern music, that is really her stage name, and she is built like a stallion. And she is, she's a very popular hip hop artist. But we've already gone over this. If you're minus 350 and you're in an open category, you're not bettable. And I mean, not that anything would ever be really bettable at minus 350. But obviously we have to look elsewhere. And actually, she's minus 375 as we speak on Bovada. So you have to look to fade her. And we acknowledge that she could easily win. Like, this is not saying she's not going to win. It's just, if you're looking for value, we got to look elsewhere. When I went on Tuesday, the second favorite was an artist called Doja Cat, who was plus 400 at the time. She has since drifted up to plus 900. And I think that's appropriate because she's also a hip hop artist and kind of on the raunchy side, as is Megan Thee Stallion. And if you're a Grammy voter, I really can't see any reason why you would go against Megan Thee Stallion, but then decide you would vote for Doja Cat. Like, I just don't see that. If you're voting against Megan Thee Stallion, it's because you're not interested in voting for a hip hop artist, or she's just not doing it for you. And like, you are supporting some other genre of music. So I think that reinforces why Doja Cat's odds have drifted up. And she was the second choice. Now she's the third choice. Now, just to play process of elimination, there's two nominees named D Smoke and Chica, and they are both, again, rappers, and they're not going to beat the top two, or they're not going to beat Megan Thee Stallion. So, we can eliminate them. Ingrid Andress is a country singer, right? We already talked about there being a bias against country singers. And she did not even win Best New Female Country Artist at the Country Music Awards. So it would be pretty shocking if she won this. So we're going to eliminate her. So looking at the other three, Phoebe Bridgers, when I got on Tuesday, she was the third choice at 7-1. She's an indie rock or alternative artist. Her album, I'm not going to claim that I had listened to her album before this, but I did listen to her album now, and it got outstanding reviews. Like, I had never heard of her prior to the nominations, but now I see her album listed in just about every music publication as being one of the top 10 albums of the year. And a couple of them, she was the #1 album of the year. And her style is definitely more palatable to Grammy voters than Megan Thee Stallion. She's going to appeal to a wider range of listeners. I bet her at 7-1. She's now 3-1. So I feel, shitty doing, putting that out there. I don't know that she's bettable at 3-1. At 7-1, absolutely she was. Now, again, if you find her better than 3-1 on some other site, I think she's worth a play. I spread a little money around a couple other picks. Kate Trinata is basically a DJ. I'm not generally well versed in who's popular in the dance party and rave scene, but apparently right now he's the #1 in that genre. And he released an album in 2019 that immediately went to #1 on the US dance charts. He's one of those guys that Nolan always wonders, like, how do you, has this guy, you pay him $200,000 to show up for 2 hours at your club and
for one night
music. Right, for one night. And this is that guy. Okay. But if Grammy voters decide to go, in what would be a new direction for them, but it would definitely be more in tune with the times, you're getting 16-1 on him. I think that's definitely worth a small play. And the other small play I made was on Noah Cyrus. I don't know if I'm pronouncing her first name correctly. She's an interesting nominee because she's the younger sister of Miley Cyrus. And she sounds kind of similar to Miley Cyrus, which is a high compliment. And just on name recognition alone, I think she's worth a play. She's the only bet I made where the odds went in the wrong direction. I bet her at 22-1, and now she's 25-1. I think at 25-1, you definitely put a little something down on her. I mean, again, is Megan Thee Stallion probably going to win? Yeah, she's probably got like a 50% chance of winning. But at the odds that you're getting these other long shots on, take a shot. This is reminiscent to me. I'm just going to go back in history one more time. 2011, which is the longest shot I've ever seen for Best New Artist, was Esperanza Spalding. She was a jazz musician, and she won at 20-1. It's like, well, who were the other nominees? Justin Bieber and Drake and Florence and the Machine and Mumford and Sons, who were all, each of them are immensely popular artists and have sold millions of albums, and nobody had heard of Esperanza Spalding. But if you look at it from the album that she appealed to a wider range of voters, and like Justin Bieber is like more of a niche and Drake is more of a niche, then you can land on a long shot by looking in that direction. So, is somebody like Phoebe Bridgers or Noah Cyrus going to appeal to a wider audience than Megan Thee Stallion? Absolutely. So, yes, I think as a long shot, those were my plays. I didn't put any significant money on them. I mean, those are flyers,
Here's an interesting comment from someone, a follow-up to your brilliant analysis there. But the comment is along the lines of, how do you compare, it's like comparing two great paintings, Picasso and a Pollock or something. How do you compare these two things? They're completely different visions of the artist, very different, genres, obviously in music, even everything that goes into creating a great song or a great album is different. And so putting these up against each other, really the handicapping tools, I'm getting to the question here, the handicapping tools that are required have very little to do with what song or what album you personally think is superior, but you're weighing many, many other factors. That's pretty much an encapsulation of the way you're handicapping, yes?
I would say so. I mean, using Kendrick Lamar as an example, I mean, anybody who is capable of liking rap can acknowledge how great his albums were. But there's absolutely got to be a section of Grammy voters and also a section of the population that's just going to tune it out. Like, they're not only will they never appreciate his genius, but they're never even going to try. They're just like, no, this is not doing it for me. And so that's what I mean about you need to find something that has a greater widespread appeal most of the time. Going back to the two artists that won album of the year as hip hop artists, Lauryn Hill and Outkast. Lauryn Hill was absolutely like a more widespread appeal. Like, she did a remake on her album that won album of the year. She did a remake of Can't Take My Eyes Off of You, the Four Seasons song. So it's like she paid tribute to an older artist and she tried to reach a wider audience by using that album. So somebody, on the older side, or somebody whiter, to be honest, is like, oh shit, I recognize that song, oh, and she's got a nice voice. And she did a really nice rendition of this song from the early 70s. It takes something like that. But and same thing with Outkast. Outkast, was really more than just your run-of-the-mill hip-hop artist. I mean, they really tried to pay tribute to the artists that came before them. So, you need to have that widespread appeal. And other than that, yeah, you kind of get put into a very narrow category. And it is hard to compare, somebody in one narrow category to somebody in another narrow category. And you just, from a handicapping perspective, you just have to sort of get in their head and be like, how many people are just going to tune this out right upon listening to it? How many people are going to say, that this isn't doing it for me? And yeah, I mean, I don't want to keep repeating myself, but that's pretty much
so two quickies here. How much does the voting reflect the actual composition of the music industry? In other words, it's going to certainly be more urban, Black, probably, like Latinos, for example. I don't know what percentage Latinos make up of the population. I'm going to say 12, 15%, somewhere in there, maybe. I don't know the number. But clearly that's a higher number in the industry. I would think also in terms of sales, yes. So does that mean that they have more votes and they would perform a little better? You see where I'm going with that question?
I do. I don't have an exact answer for that, but I do think that factors into handicapping in reverse. In other words, songs that are very popular are usually songs to fade because, especially in those genres that you just mentioned, where it's like there's a very popular rap song. Um, just in terms of sales, it had the most sales of any of the nominees. So it also gets some action just because it's popular, more people have heard of it, more people want to root for it because they like the song, but that doesn't mean it's going to get more votes. So sometimes these artists will get overbet. And that was absolutely the case, for example, with Kanye West back in the day, in the early 2000s, for Kanye West to be a minus 400 favorite for album of the year. And you absolutely know that there is a cross section of Grammy voters that were not going to vote for him, no matter what, So, but those odds reflected his popularity, his album sales. Like, they were through the roof. Like he was absolutely the most popular artist of that year, but it doesn't mean he's going to win. So that's where you look to fade. You look to fade popular artists that aren't necessarily going to reach a widespread audience.
Yeah. So what's the difference in, again, another question here. Thank you for those of you who are typing in here and also sending, I've got a couple of different forums open here. Popularity, like the Oscar Awards, the Academy Awards, a lot of times the blockbusters are completely ignored. Rightfully so, by the way, I would say as, somewhat of a elitist here. I mean, just because something makes $300 million at the box office doesn't mean it deserves to be, the best picture of the year. However, it seems that the Grammys, or at least in the terms of nominations, they cannot ignore blockbuster recordings. Is that correct?
No, I disagree with that.
Regarding nomination.
Okay, no, and I'll give a good example. This year, The Weeknd got completely snubbed, and his latest album, After Hours, besides the fact that it's a great album, was one of the best-selling albums of the year. It was one of 3 nominees for Album of the Year at the American Music Awards, right? Only 3 albums got nominated. He was one of them. But it's not one of 8 nominees for Album of the Year at the Grammys. I mean, that's absurd. So if they were just going based on popularity, there's no way you could ignore him. Like, you have to nominate him. So, he won Best R&B Album and Best R&B Song at the American Music Awards, and he can't even get a nomination for either one of those. And his other hit song, Blinding Lights, got nominated for Best Pop Song at the AMAs also. It's like, and if you remember a past discussion we had of music, I rated him as like the best artist of the past decade. I thought, his song Starboy was the best song of the past 10 years. And it's like, and gets 1 billion views on YouTube. And then he doesn't get a nomination this year.
Well, I've got to follow up then, because you chimed in on one of the questionnaires we were before the show. I think it was yesterday when you said you were going to come on. You actually defended him. I think he was going to boycott the awards. I think, or not show up, or I forgot. I don't know if it's boycott. That's the right word. He refused to perform, I think, at this year's awards because he was essentially, shafted by the nominating committee or what have you. But you say him being pissed off is justified.
Yes, I mean, sometimes people are crying sour grapes or whatever. When you see some of the I'm not trying to disparage any of the nominees for Album of the Year, but if he was nominated for Album of the Year, he would absolutely instantly be one of the 3 favorites. Not just one of the 3 betting favorites, but one of the 3 favorites to win. So for him not to be nominated in a field of 8 is absurd. For his song not to be nominated, not even in the minor category, like forget about Song of the Year and Record of the Year. Like, you're not going to nominate him for Best R&B Song? I mean, that's absurd. When it won Best R&B Song at the American Music Awards, it's a very legitimate beef. Yeah. So I was going to mention a couple other snubs, but I won't waste the time. He's the big one. He's the big one that got snubbed this year. So that goes against your argument where, like, a popular artist can't be ignored.
Is there any artist that you just think was a complete oversight? Now, this is not the same as being snubbed, but is there anybody that you listen to, and you listen to, as you say, a lot of music? Yeah. Who do you think was the one that, man, how come this one didn't get nominated? What was?
Yeah, this is just from a personal standpoint. I don't think she would have necessarily gotten nominated in the open categories, but I have a soft spot for like original pop music because we've talked about this before as well. As more time goes by, it is harder and harder to create original, catchy pop music. And there's an artist named Ava Max who has never received a Grammy nomination. And she had a hit song in 2019 called Sweet But Psycho, which I would call one of my 5 favorite songs of the last decade. Like, it was a really catchy, really fun pop song. And I was really surprised that it got no nominations. And now this year, I don't know exactly when the cutoff was. She had another hit song called Kings and Queens that is all over the radio and is very catchy and very, again, just like another pop song that's like, wow, she's churning out this, sing at the top of your voice while you're driving in the car type of song that got no nominations. So I really hope she gets some recognition somewhere down the line. I think she deserves it.
All right, Matt. So how many more picks do you have here, for our show? I'm going to try to budget the questions here.
Sure. 3 more categories. Record of the year, song of the year.
Yeah, why don't you hold off your big category at the end, and I'll have a couple more questions. We're going to bait this as long as we can, keep people on the hook. But for the last category, so you got 3 more, and then I'll get to a few more questions here that people have.
You got it. All right, so let's go to record of the year. So this is an interesting scenario because Taylor Swift, who is the prohibitive favorite in album of the year and song of the year, did not even get nominated for record of the year. And it's like, conceptually, I understand what's supposed to be the difference between record of the year and song of the year. Record of the year is supposed to recognize the recording process, and song of the year is supposed to recognize the songwriting process. But the more time that goes by, the more I continue to question whether that distinction matters. Because like I've said, if we go back in the past 20 years, more than half the time, the same song has won record of the year and song of the year, including the past 3 years. Both the exact same song has won in both categories. So ideally, what would be the perfect scenario is if you could wait for the winner of one and then jump in with a bet on the other. Obviously, you can't do that. The only time we could really do that was last year with Billie Eilish, where we could parlay across categories, and it worked. So I don't think they're going to offer a bet like that again. At least if I were the sportsbook manager, I wouldn't offer that again. Dua Lipa, Don't Start Now is the name of the song by Dua Lipa. It's the -200 favorite, or it opened at -200. Now it drifted up a little to -185. I think those odds are about right. I think she's the deserving favorite, but I think she's a vulnerable favorite. Ironically, I don't even think it's one of the 3 best songs on her album. And we'll talk about that in a little bit. But I think, again, based on the timing, it's the song that qualified to be nominated this year. So that's why it's the song that got the nominations. Beyonce was the second choice. When on Tuesday, she's drifted up a little bit. She opened at, well, no, I take it back. She opened at 650. She's still 650, but a couple of others drifted down. Like I said before, maybe Beyonce will win, but until they show a willingness to award her in the major categories, you can't bet her. And then just, not to oversimplify it, but you've got in the other nominees 4 hip hop artists and a psychedelic soul group, the Black Pumas. You've got 4 hip hop artists, DaBaby, Post Malone, Doja Cat, and Megan Thee Stallion. I don't see the Grammy artists sitting there and like debating the merits of one of them over the other, because I don't think enough of the Grammy voters have the capability to do that. I don't know them personally, but just from what I've seen from their track record, it's like if there's more than one hip hop artist in a given category, none of them ever win in an open category. So, are they going to sit down and say, "Ooh, Megan Thee Stallion sounds a lot better than Post Malone"? Like, I just don't see that conversation taking place. So where does that leave us? It leaves us with Billie Eilish is nominated this year. Didn't she just sweep the categories last year? I mean, clearly the Grammy voters like her. And she opened at plus 650 for record of the year. And now she's drifted down to plus 575. Again, I think Dua Lipa is the deserving favorite, but at plus 650 or even plus 575, absolutely I'm going to take a shot on Billie Eilish. She just won all 4 major categories last year. We know that she has widespread appeal among Grammy voters. So she's absolutely worth a shot at that price. So that's my
I'm sorry.
play.
All right, quick question on that, to interrupt you. What's the history on again, the fatigue factor? I'm so tired of watching this one win. Let's get somebody fresh up there. That doesn't influence the ballots. I remember example. I think it was Michael Jackson had Bad after, I forgot what album, it won all these awards, and then he had the next year, and that album didn't fare nearly as well, although the sales were almost as high in popularity and so forth.
I mean, the short answer is no. I'll give you an example that I think of. Alison Krauss, who had in her lifetime, she had 42 Grammy nominations, and she won 27 times. And a lot of those were in the open category. And it's like, she'd win in the open category, then she'd get nominated again. It's like, oh, are they going to pick her again? It's like, yeah, they picked her again. And this is not somebody who sells a lot of albums even, so maybe there is a little bit of fatigue factor. Maybe after giving Billie Eilish every category last year, maybe they'll feel like, all right, we don't want to overdo it. But you're still getting 6-1 on her. You got to take a shot, especially when you consider how weak the rest of the nominees are. Like, if she gets beat by a hip hop artist, all right, you take it. Like, you're not going to bet any of them because they don't have any value. You're not going to bet Beyonce because there's no value in betting Beyonce in a major category. And there's no value in betting Dua Lipa because she's too heavy of a favorite. So if you're going to bet, that's the only logical place your money can go, in my opinion, for record of the year. Shall we do song of the year is going to be relatively quick. Should I just jump straight to that?
Please go ahead. Yes.
All right. So now Taylor Swift is nominated for Song of the Year, and she's the minus 160 favorite. That's a fade for me only because of what I just discussed, where it's like whoever wins record of the year, instantly you like their odds a lot better for Song of the Year. So Dua Lipa, who was what was she, plus 325 when she opened? Now she's plus 275. All right, so we can't bet her in record of the year, but she's almost a 2-1 favorite. And if she does win record of the year, then all of a sudden we like her a lot better at Song of the Year, and at plus 275 or better, now you got some value on her. So yeah, so I bet Dua Lipa for Song of the Year, and I also bet Billie Eilish for the same logic. She was 9-1, and now she's down to 8-1. Absolutely. What if Billie Eilish wins record of the year? Now I love her for Song of the Year. So, is Taylor Swift the deserving favorite? Yeah. Okay, there's probably a 50% chance she wins this category. But at the price, give me Dua Lipa at 3-1, give me Billie Eilish at up to 9-1. Again, going through the other nominees, you got to fade Beyonce, you got to fade Post Malone, you got to fade Roddy Ricch, and her. And the last one is JP Sachs featuring Julia Michaels, 24-1. I just don't think, that's a reasonable pick. So my plays were Dua Lipa and Billie Eilish. Nothing serious, nothing serious on record of the year either. Like in the first 3 categories, I didn't bet the farm in any of them. In Best New Artist, I had 3 different plays. I did have a significant wager on Phoebe Bridgers. But small plays on Kate Renata and Noah Cyrus. In record of the year, I had a small play on Billie Eilish, and Song of the Year, a decent sized play on Dua Lipa, because I think at 3-1, Again, given that she is the favorite to win Record of the Year, I think now getting 3-1 on her for Song of the Year is pretty good value. And then a small play on Billie Eilish at 9-1. So those are the plays for the first three categories.
All right. And so do you have one more, the final award, is that correct to say?
The big one is Album of the Year.
Okay, yeah. So before you give that one, yeah. It's funny, when I get interviewed on these kinds of shows about handicapping, I'm going to ask you the question that I hate being asked, because it's basically what I call the oversimplification question. And what I mean by that is a lot of people watching, maybe they play this back later, and they say, I wouldn't mind having one bet down, or, I have $20 on my account, I'm going to fire it on this. And and of course their entire future Grammys betting is going to be predicated on whether or not they win or lose that bet. If they win, they're hooked for life, and they think they're a Grammy expert. And if they lose, they're saying, I'm never going to bet on that shit again. So the pressure is on for you to build some interest in Grammys betting, Matt, which you're an expert on. So if somebody just has that $20 in their account, without giving away your final category, where's the $20 going?
Whew. That's a good question. Here's the thing with the Grammy betting is that you said that there's some years that just don't work out. The years that don't work out, I have no regrets about them. And I mean that, like literally no regrets. Like I cannot think of a year, at least in the past decade, where a particular artist won and I did like a post-mortem and I'm like, oh shoot, I should have had them. Like I look at I'll just give a couple quick examples. Like in 2013, Mumford & Sons won, and they were the -200 favorite. It's like, okay, they won. There's no way I'm laying -200 on Mumford & Sons to win. I'm just not. Like you take that and you move on. I just said 2019, Casey Musgraves is a country artist and she's the betting favorite and she won. Say, okay, she won. It doesn't make me regret any of my plays. Like, I think she had, roughly a 30% chance of winning and she won. Okay, good for her. So, you're going to have years that just don't work out, but the years that work out, you're going to hit some long shots and they more than make up for the ones that you missed. And so that's kind of what we're hoping for is like, especially this year, we're going to have some long shot plays. Maybe one of them is going to come in. If they come in, great. Then this is one of the years that pays for, if you hit one 10-1 shot, then you're good for 10 years, theoretically, So that's where I'm at with that, where it's like, if you want a safe bet, yeah, you could do a Lipa and lay -200 and maybe win $10 off of your 20. But if you want to take a shot, we're going to take a shot. So, and album, like I said, with so far all of them have long shots. Like Best New Artist is all long shots, and then if you take Billie Eilish, those are long shots. And then Album of the Year, we're going to go bombs away on a couple of them. So
all right, well let's start dropping the bombs. Thank you for those of you who tuned in. Appreciate you being with us. Here's Matt's final picks, I should say, of the 2021 Grammys. Go ahead, take it away, Matt.
Right on. Thank you, Nolan. And let me just echo what you said. Thank you for all the questions and everything. I love fielding those. I love any interest in the Grammy Awards. It's like my favorite event of the year. So thank you for tuning in for this. Album of the Year. As I said, I listened to all 8 albums, even when I had a preconceived notion that like I was already going to eliminate a particular artist. I listened to the album the whole way through. So let's start out from a process of elimination. We're going to eliminate 4 of them right off the bat. Janae Aiko, I hope I'm pronouncing it right. She is, 20-1? I mean, she's 0 for 3 in previous Grammy nominations, and those were all in minor categories. She's hard to categorize because what she does is clearly like hip hop, but it's set to soft R&B sounding beats. So, maybe she'll win her first Grammy for Best Progressive R&B Album, because I think that's a good categorization for this album, but it's not Album of the Year caliber. I'd give her a 1% chance of winning just because I can't give a 0% chance of winning because then God forbid it wins, and so I'd say 1% chance to her. The Black Pumas are also 20-1. Their genre is psychedelic soul. I enjoyed listening to it. It was pretty unique. But they are an extremely specific genre. And as we said, you generally don't win being a very specific genre because it's just not going to appeal to all Grammy voters. If you're not really tuned into it, you're going to fall into the mindset of all the songs are starting to sound similar. And you're going to fall into the mindset of, okay, when does this album end already? You're really not going to give every new song a fresh listen because they're all starting to sound the same to you. And they didn't win Best New Artist when they were nominated for that. So same as Janae Aiko, I give them a 1% chance of winning. I think you got to fade them. There's a group named Haim. They're 20-1 as well. They're a female pop rock group. They're pretty straightforward pop rock. I mean, they're easy to listen to, but they're just not album of the year caliber. They're a little too basic for that. And they also didn't win Best New Artist when they were nominated for that. So that's not a good sign. So again, I'm going to give them a 1% chance of winning. So that's the three of them. Post Malone is the next one I'll address. Right now he's sitting at 13-1. He's hip hop, but he's not a stereotypical hip hop artist. He does blend other sounds. He almost sounds like progressive pop-ish on some of the tracks in the album. But he's still classified as hip hop. And he has a lot of things working against him. His album is almost entirely auto-tuned, and auto-tune does not sit well with Grammy voters.
Boo. We don't like auto-tune.
Well, kidding aside, Grammy voters do not favor auto-tune. He uses a ton of profanity in his album.
Yay, profanity! Yay!
I would say some profanity is. I'm just talking from a Grammy viewpoint. Some profanity is acceptable, like especially when it adds something artistically. But when you just churn it out nonstop, that tends to be a turnoff for Grammy.
Yeah, excuse me, Matt. When the song of the year is "Fuck You."
I thought that one had a shot.
Bar is high, sir. The bar is high.
That was a creative song, but don't get me started.
It's a great song.
One. Yeah,
I love that song.
But no, I'm talking about this entire album. There's just constant profanity. So it gets to the point where it's not adding anything artistically. It's just like, you just sort of have to start ignoring it. What else works against him? He's 0 for 6 in previous Grammy nominations, including 0 for 3 in the minor awards. And as I said already, Lauryn Hill and Outkast, that's it. That's the list for now. So we're not going to bet any hip hop artist. So, I give him a 2% chance of winning. So out of those 4 nominations, I've allotted a 5% chance of winning. So there's your fades. Okay. So now let's get to the more realistic nominees, starting with Taylor Swift. Taylor Swift opened as the -300 favorite. She's now -200. I will quickly tell the story of how the odds moved, but I'll get to that in a little bit because that I thought was a pretty interesting story. Taylor Swift. All right, I'm going to give her about a 40% chance of winning. She's got a very unique set of circumstances surrounding her album. She did essentially no promotion for it. It was released as a complete surprise, even to her record label. They did not even know. They found out at the same time that the public found out that she was releasing an album. And it was still an enormous success. It was by far the best-selling album of the year, which speaks not only to her popularity, it also demonstrated that having a ton of promotion leading up to an album's release is no longer necessary. Especially, in these times of immediate gratification, it's she sort of opened people's eyes. It's all right, promotion isn't necessary. So, just from that perspective, it was groundbreaking. It was the best reviewed album of her career. And that's saying a lot, given that this was her 8th album. in an already extremely successful career. Um, as the title of the album suggests, it's called Folklore. It has a much softer, much more folksy sound than her previous upbeat and pop sounding albums. And it's an entire album in the sense that it's meant to tell a story from one song to another. And Grammy voters do tend to favor album projects that, work as a whole rather than just being like tracks that seem like they're thrown together. So she's got, plenty of things in her favor. If she was plus 200, I would say definitely, yeah, there's value at plus 200, but she's not. She's at the time, she was minus 300. So we got to look into the reasons why she's a reasonable fade. She won the American Music Award for Favorite Pop Album in 2018 and 2019, but this year she lost to Harry Styles, who ironically isn't even nominated for Album of the Year. The critiques of this album, and they're mild critiques, but the critiques of this album are that it's not much of a departure from her usual style. Like if it's very recognizably Taylor Swift, and if you've heard one, you've heard them all. I don't know that I entirely agree with that, but there is some something to be said where like if Taylor Swift just doesn't do it for you, it's not like this album is suddenly going to turn you into a fan. Like that I agree with. So again, going back to that, amazing upset of 2014 where Daft Punk won Album of the Year over Taylor Swift. I think that gives enough evidence that like there's Grammy voters where Taylor Swift just doesn't do it for them. And if that's the case, they're not going to listen to this album and suddenly change their tune, in my opinion. Which is to say her style is polarizing and not in a aggressive way, like polarizing sort of has a really negative connotation. I don't mean it that way, but it's just that there are people who love her music and they swear by her music and, they've been her fans for 15 years and, they will ride with her till they die. And then just on the other end, you just got these people that are completely, nonplussed by her style and just, if she doesn't do it for them, like you can debate the genius of her songwriting as much as you want, but they're going to listen to the album and be like, it's not doing it for me. So, that's the argument against it. She's had 41 Lifetime Grammy nominations. She's won 10 of them. That's above average, right? We said like winning more than 1 out of 5 is above average, but 10 wins out of 41 Lifetime nominations for somebody that's a prohibitive favorite, that's not the kind of track record that you want to be laying heavy wood on. So we have to fade her. Like she might win. Yeah, I said I give her about a 40% chance of winning. And if she wins, we take it. And it's like, oh, well, shit happens. But let's look to the other nominees that are more likely or give us more value, rather. All right, so now I'm going to tell the story, if I could, about.
Please do. Please, go ahead.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Future Nostalgia by Dua Lipa is an album that's been on my radar. And when the odds opened up on Tuesday, she was 4-1. And I thought that was absolutely phenomenal value at 4-1. And I immediately bet the maximum on it, which admittedly is not that much. The maximum on Bovada is to win 500. So I was able to bet 125 at 4-1 odds. Went to sleep, woke up the next morning. She was down to plus 350. And I'm like, oh, shoot, I better call and try to get more money down on it. And this is something I've done in the past with the Grammys, which is, I'd make a phone call to them and say, I'd like to put a little bit more money on such and such nominee. And usually they put me on hold for a couple of minutes and they come back and they're like, yeah, no problem. Go ahead, place your bet. And it would go through. So this year I call and I said, I'd like to place more money on this. And they said, well, that's going to be at the discretion of the sportsbook manager. I was like, yeah, I understand. So, if you could ask him. And they're like, oh, we don't do that anymore. I was like, okay, so what's going to happen? They're like, well, you place your bet and it'll be under review. And if they accept it, then it'll be accepted. And if they don't, it'll be rejected. And I'm like, so I can't even like talk to anybody. They're like, no, they don't. they're like, no, we don't talk to you anymore. I mean, they didn't say it quite like that, but basically, okay. So now, it's 7:30 in the morning. I'm like, there's not too much going on in the sports
Maybe that's
betting
the
world.
problem, Matt. It's 7:30 in the morning.
Maybe, So I go and I try to put, another few hundred on it. And, it says under review for about a minute. And then it comes back. It says this bet has been rejected. It exceeds the maximum. Immediately, they lower the odds to plus 300. And I'm like, oh, man. All right, so probably he's going to take my bet at the lower odds. I put the bet in again at plus 300 because I still thought there was value, even though I don't like getting shafted like that. I still thought there's value. And I placed the bet, and now they accepted it. And then they immediately shifted the odds to plus 250. And that's where they sit right now. Ever since Wednesday morning, the odds on Dua Lipa have been sitting at plus 250. So I feel kind of crappy saying, hey, I got it at 4-1 and 3-1, and you can get it at plus 250. Look,
that's what you get for doing all the work, Matt.
Yeah, I get some reward for doing all the work. Look, this is what I would say. I would say there's about a 35% chance of her winning. I think Taylor Swift and Dua Lipa are 1 and 1A. And I think there is still some value at plus 250, just not as much as there was before. And if you can find it at a greater value on other sites, then obviously go for it. All right, why Dua Lipa? Her album has and by the way, I'm going to freely admit this. I am saying this with some bias. I absolutely hope that she wins. I think it is the album of the year. But I can say some things objectively as well. Her album has a pure, raw energy that every one of the other nominees lacks. It is one of those albums where, like, roll down your window, sing at the top of your lungs. And I understand some Taylor Swift fans are going to say that, yeah, you can do that with Taylor Swift. But by and large, Taylor Swift songs, at least on this album especially, are more of the, like, introspective, almost depressing. You have to be in the right mood to listen to those. You're not going to be singing it at the top of your lungs when you're in a good mood. I just don't think. Whereas Dua Lipa is like, puts you in a good mood. Her album is all about paying tribute to older songs. And it will absolutely score points with Grammy voters. But, like, I'm talking about half the songs on the album pay tribute to older songs. This was the angle that got us Bruno Mars. This was the angle that made Lauryn Hill win back in the day. So one of the songs is called Physical, and the tagline, the hook, she's constantly saying, let's get physical, which is a tribute to Olivia Newton-John back in 1980. And the song sounds like it was taken straight out of Flashdance. The song Levitating, which is the main song on the radio right now, is a complete throwback to 70s pop. And I feel like it's reminiscent of Debbie Harry, Blondie. I can't exactly say why, but it's a song that Blondie would have made, She has another hit single called Break My Heart, which blatantly samples Need You Tonight by In Excess, and to a lesser extent samples Another One Bites the Dust by Queen. But it has a clear modern twist that makes it unique. And that's key to Grammy voters when you're using samples. It's like, it's okay to sample as long as you're adding something to it. And she's absolutely adding something to it. Like, she is not just regurgitating an old sound. Like, she is making it her own. Like, there are people that are listening to the songs now that this is going to be the version they remember. Like, even if you're old enough like me, and I liked the song Need You Tonight by In Excess, but now I'm going to hear that riff and I'm going to hear Dua Lipa because she put a totally new twist on it. So like I said, I listened to all the songs on all the albums. And Dua Lipa already had like 3 top hits that are getting tons of radio airplay. And so I'm listening to the album tracks, and they're good. I mean, they're all above average, and I'm enjoying them and whatever. Okay. Then I come across a song called Love Again, which samples Your Woman by Whitetown, which was a song that came out in 1997 which sampled a jazz song from the 1930s called My Woman by an artist named Al Bowley. And I'm sorry if I'm getting too deep with this stuff, but I love talking about this stuff. So I thought Your Woman by Whitetown in 1997 was one of the best uses of a sample ever, bar none. They found this 1930s jazz riff and they modernized it. I say they, but it's one guy. And he made a hit out of it. And it was phenomenal to me. And now Dua Lipa has this song called Love Again. And I'm listening to it. It's got like a sort of a soft opening where you can't really tell where the song's going. And 25 seconds into it, it samples it to a disco beat. And I jumped out of my seat and I went, oh shit. And it was just like, Nolan, we talked about those pull your car over moments.
Yeah.
I had one of those moments with this song. And it hasn't even been released as a single yet. And then it jumps into this disco beat. I wish we had the time to play it. I'm not going to spend the time. But I encourage anybody who likes pop music to go onto, YouTube or whatever and listen to Love Again by Dua Lipa. And it is, in my opinion, the best song on the album. Hasn't even been a single yet. It's charted in 8 countries without being released as a single, just based on people downloading it. So I've said my piece about that song. I know I'm over the top. I've probably oversold it, and now you're going to listen to it and think it's not all that. But I think it's the best song I've heard in ever since Starboy, which goes back 5 or 6 years. Okay, going back to why to bet on her. She's 2 for 2 with Grammy nominations, from her first album. She did win Best New Artist. She has 6 nominations this year from a second album, which is objectively better than her first album, which is, hard to do when her first album already got as much critical acclaim as it did. If she cleans up this year, I'm not saying she's going to win all 6, but if she wins like 4 out of 6, 5 out of 6, and now she's like 6 or 7 out of 8 lifetime in the Grammys are basically signaling the passing of the torch to Dua Lipa as like the reigning queen of pop. And I think the odds of that happening are at least 1 in 3. I think she is the present and possibly the future of pop music, at least for the next few years. So just from that angle, we talked about record of the year, song of the year, and now maybe album of the year. It's like, yeah, she could become the new Grammy darling. And I see that as a likely enough scenario that it's worth it to back her at the price. So we'll start with that. I think, again, if the odds were reversed, if it was like Dua Lipa was the -200 favorite and Taylor Swift was +200, I'd basically be saying the same thing, but I'd be like, there's no value in Dua Lipa. I'd bet Taylor Swift. But you can get at least +250 on Dua Lipa. That's the direction I would go.
You don't bet teams, you don't bet people, you bet numbers. That's kind of what you're saying.
Right. Yeah? That's right. But now, it's not that much of a long shot. Let's go with the 2 long shot picks. And one of them, and this is going pretty deep, one of them is Jacob Collier, who is listed at 13-1 right now. It's a very unique album because he's a jazz artist, but his album has like a modern electronic twist. And in this album, it feels like the jazz really takes a back seat. He declared 2 years ago that he was going to do a 4-album project. Like, not too many artists do that. They're like, I'm going to release 4 albums over the next 4 years that's going to have 50 songs. And he's done that. He released 1 album in 2018, 1 in 2019, and then he released this album. And in general, you think to yourself, okay, maybe it's too specific of a genre to appeal universally to Grammy voters. But he is 4 for 4 in past Grammy nominations in minor categories. But still, if you think about it like a horse race, it's like a horse that wins in the allowance company and is undefeated and like has never run in a stakes race.
Yeah, the fact he's nominated previously shows they're noticing, or they've taken notice to his work, so that he's on the stage, so to speak.
Right. And now it's like until he runs in the stakes race, you don't know. Maybe he is that good, or maybe he does carry that much appeal to the Grammy voters that they're willing to make him album of the year. So, and there's some history to back this up, right? Esperanza Spalding was 20-1 for Best New Artist as a jazz musician. Herbie Hancock was the biggest long shot ever for Album of the Year, 22-1. He was a jazz musician. So now you got this long shot jazz musician who's 4 for 4 in past Grammy nominations. I got to give him at least a 10% chance of winning based on that. Here's a little.
Excuse me, Matt. You said he went off at 13-1 right now.
Right now, I got him. Sorry to keep saying I got him, but now I got him at 14-1 when he opened, so he's dropped slightly to 13-1 now.
Okay.
Here is a weird twist that as soon as I saw it, I liked my bet even more. A little Grammy trivia. Who's the most nominated artist of all time? Would you happen to know?
You mentioned Beyonce earlier, didn't you?
Beyonce's the most nominated female artist, and she has 79, and she probably will become the most nominated artist of all time. But for the moment, the most nominated artist with 80 nominations is Quincy Jones.
Quincy Jones, yeah.
Okay. So Jacob Collier, I hope I'm pronouncing his name right. He was sort of a YouTube sensation. He put all his music up on YouTube. And who discovered him? Quincy Jones. And Quincy Jones flew him out to Canada to meet him there. And who does Quincy Jones introduce him to? Herbie Hancock. And how does Jacob Collier get his start in the field? He opens for Herbie Hancock. And there's just too much of a connection here. Like just too many, like my spidey senses going off, where it's like Quincy Jones is this Grammy darling. So he carries some sway with the Grammy voters. And I'm not going to read too much into that or spout any conspiracy theories, but I'm just going to say, if you're affiliated with Quincy Jones, already your chances went up. And now Herbie Hancock is the one that scored the biggest long shot for Album of the Year. And now this is the guy that opened for him in concert. And now he gets this Grammy nod for Album of the Year somewhat out of nowhere. Because again, it's the third album in a series of 4. Like that's a really weird time to be nominating somebody for Album of the Year. But it also has all these guest appearances by lots of artists from different genres. Herbie Hancock's album had featured all these guest appearances where it's like the jazz was there in the background, but it kind of took a back seat. So too many things, too many similarities are just going off in my head. So I definitely think this is a live long shot. I give it a 10% chance of winning at least. So at 13-1, there's definitely value. On some sites, like I said, I got it at 14-1. Maybe you'll even get higher. So that's one of my co-live long shots.
Oh, and by the way, just to throw in one more brick, using the old song "A Brick in the Wall." These are really not bricks; these are cinder blocks. Talking about Quincy Jones and some other, perfect storms. But you mentioned at the top of our show that the average voter at Grammys is, not 23 years old. They tend to be in their 40s, maybe even 50s. So that could carry, yes, more weight and probably help that artist as well.
Absolutely. And just again, jazz in general, doesn't appeal to, it doesn't sell albums, right? But it's easy enough to listen to that, pretty much anybody that listens to Jacob Collier's album is going to make it through it. Like it's interesting enough that catches your attention. And you're not necessarily going to say, oh, this is my favorite album, but it's good enough that it transcends genres and can have enough of an appeal to everybody that maybe it's enough to win. So that's one live long shot. The other live long shot, and if you happen to know who the nominees are, then you know who's left. The other one is Coldplay, who opened, sorry to keep doing this, Coldplay opened at 16-1. They're now down to 12-1. Why Coldplay? They get what we discussed before, the Lifetime Achievement Award angle, which has won a bunch of times in recent memory, most recently by Beck in 2015. But you don't even have to go back much further than that. Like we talked about Herbie Hancock and Ray Charles and Steely Dan, right? They did not win based on the strength of the current album being voted on. They basically won for their, decades long body of work. And that's what we have here with Coldplay. Coldplay's been around for over 20 years. They've never won Album of the Year. This is a good album. It's definitely not their best album. I think even they would say that. But it's another one of those albums that was a real project. Like it was 16 songs that worked together with each other, which again, I said is something that Grammy voters tend to favor. And it's extremely listenable. Coldplay transcends genres. They don't tend to turn off anybody. I mean, I don't want to speak too much in generalities, but Coldplay is easy listening enough that people are again going to make it through their albums. There's a little bit of profanity, which is sort of unusual for Coldplay, but again, it's the kind that adds artistic value. It's not the kind that's just like an F-bomb every other word. They've won 7 Grammys, which when you consider how long their career has been is not that much, but they've never won Album of the Year. And I think just from that angle alone, I'm going to give them a 10% chance of winning. So again, anything over 9-1 is going to have some value. So, as your long shot picks, I would go to Jacob Collier and Coldplay, right now sitting at 13-1 and 12-1 on Bovada. And you just cross your fingers and hope for the best. Hope this is one of those years that a long shot comes in and you sit back and smile and, at least you recognize the angle that led to that. Like if I didn't take either one of those two, then, and then they get picked, I would absolutely sit back in the postmortem and regret not playing them. I said, oh yeah, there was definitely value, based on just the angles that I discussed. So, if you decide to follow these picks along with me, good luck and let's hope for the best. Let's hope, this is not just a situation where the favorites come in, another boring year of favorites.
Well, that was just absolutely riveting, fantastic analysis. Just what we expected from the great Matt Lessinger. Matt, I got to ask you this before we go and we tell folks about our upcoming shows. When you're watching the Grammys, is it like you're watching a football game where you fist bump and everything? By the way, a quick story on this. Back in, I think it was 2003, the Oscars, I had my biggest award show wager on Chris Cooper to win Best Supporting Actor. I had $3,000, which for me at the time was like,
holy crap.
Yeah, as an Olympic, they took huge numbers. This is back in the old Wild West days. But wow. Chris, it was like a minus 240 or something. So I only won back like $1,200 or something. But Chris Cooper was such a lock to win the Best Supporting Actor. And I remember shivering as I'm standing up watching, when they have, I forgot who comes up. It was Julia Roberts or somebody announces, and she stumbles over the name. If you ever watch the tape, she messes up the initial announcement. I was like, "Fuck!" She didn't say Chris, and then she said, "Oh, Chris Cooper," and then so it won. But is that kind of energy for you when you're watching these awards?
The year that Beck won in 2015, Prince was the presenter for Album of the Year, and for whatever reason, Prince was really understated that year and really soft-spoken, almost like he didn't want to be there. No, he was. If you go back and watch the footage, Prince gets up there, he gets up tremendous standing ovation from the crowd. And then from the time he starts talking, like it was just boom, boom, boom. Like, here are the nominees, here's the winner. Like in a very soft-spoken monotone. And he says, and the winner is Morning Phase, Beck. And it's like, I had to do a double take. I'm like, am I sure I heard that correctly? And so then, I see Beck walking up on stage, but then freaking Kanye West walks up on stage, and now I'm thrown off. I'm like, what the hell just happened? And remember, Kanye West goes up on stage just to joke about like protesting for Beyonce. And then Kanye West goes and sits down, and Beck gives his acceptance speech. And that's when I did the real fist pump. I'm like, oh, wow, that was my biggest winner in a single bet. Because I think I got down like $400 on that at 7-1. Oh, between 7-1 and 10-1. So I ended up, winning over 3,000 on that. I never put down anything like you just said. Like,
yeah, but I was laying the other side. I was going back a big minus price. So we went up winning about the same,
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, no, absolutely. Like I'll be glued to the screen this year. I mean,
it's so funny though. No, it's so funny to you do the work, and I think that those of you watching us will understand this. It's the validity of the research. And obviously there's wild cards, and you have to get very lucky, especially for some of this stuff that is really very difficult to figure out with so many moving parts. And you talk about the very last category, for example. A couple of long shots here. You said the reason why these co-favorites, if they're flip-flopped, I mean, there's a lot of guesswork going into this. And that's really the beauty. It's not like just, the Super Bowl is kind of boring compared to the Grammys in the sense of you've got so many multiple possibilities. It's like chess. You're thinking 8 moves ahead here. It's just fascinating. And I really appreciate the attention to detail. You did a really good job, Matt Lessinger, on sharing a very complex, methodology to handicapping. You made it simple, you made it fun, and let's hope it pays off for us and for hopefully some viewers out there. Let me tell anything else before I wrap up and tell viewers about our next show?
No, and thank you again for giving me the platform all these years. Like, I don't reach that much of an audience, but between your blog and your Facebook page, and you have a much greater presence, and you've really put me out there for the past decade with the Grammy picks. I really appreciate your continuing to do that, and again this year. And like you said, I'm just giving estimates with what I think from a handicapping perspective are the odds of each candidate winning. And we just make our best guesses and hope for the best, and hope we make some money this year. But thanks again, Nolan. Yeah.
Thank you, Matt Lessinger. Usually my co-host on a show we call An Intelligent Conversation, and this has certainly been that, I think, and we would agree. Letting the viewers know what we're up to the next couple of weeks. I believe in a week or two, we're going to be doing something very unusual. We're going to talk about mental health, particularly hopefully coming out of the pandemic, the COVID crisis. And we've got a couple of guests, Jeannie David, who is an expert on obsessive compulsive behavior. She's going to be one of our guests. And then Diane Mercer, who is one of the foremost authorities on marital relationships, and she's out of Los Angeles. She'll be joining us. So we have 2 ladies coming in to be Matt and I, who co-host our show. That'll be the next one on deck, and I'm really looking forward to that one. And by the way, mental health, maybe we're going to need that show after watching the Grammys. So, and then finally, I guess wrapping up at least this month of March, going into April, the next big award show coming up is the Academy Awards. And this is an Academy Awards like no other. The fact that, most of the time audiences go to actual theaters and see the movies, or at least are familiar with a lot of the films. I looked at this year's nominees for, the leading categories: Best Actor, Best Actress, Best Picture. And, I haven't seen, 9 out of 10 of these nominees I've not seen. And I usually am one of those movie files that watches every single film. Of course, it takes me 12 months to go throughout the year. So this is a very unusual field to handicap in the Academy Awards. And there is a lot more betting on the Academy Awards. We can explain that in our show coming up as well. We're trying to promote the Grammys here, but that's going to be a very exciting show coming up in about 3 weeks or so that we'll be doing also with Matt Lessinger and myself. So again, those of you who sent in questions, I thank you. And we will come back again next time. And good luck to your Grammy on your picks. And I hope you'll join us again. Thank you very much.